Hello, this is the first video in my series how to create tower defense in Unity. In this series we are going to create the game mechanics based on Warcraft 3 custom maps. The main difference is that the player can build towers in any place he wants, and the enemies would always walk the shortest path possible, and the towers would be the obstacle in their path. So in this tutorial we are going to create the board. The board would be responsible for placing objects and creating the visual part. So instantiating the prefabs we have, and we can specify the size of the board. And that basically it. This is all we need to actually build our tower defense game. Okay, so first of all, let's create the prefabs. So I would drop all the textures from here. So I would use the first four as the towers, those three for the enemies, and those two for the bullets. So now let's just change their name. So I would just skip it. Okay, so now let's create a folder for the prefabs. So prefabs. And let's drop one by one everything in here. And actually let's create another folder, towers. So towers would be inside of here. And enemies. So now let's create some tiles. So I want to make it to be multiple sprite editor, and let's just set it to be by grid size 32 by 32. So now each tile has 32 pixels in it, and now when we drop one you can see it's too small and I want to make them align perfectly. So if we set the size here to be 32 pixels per 100 units, they would perfectly align. So let's just save one of those here, and that's it. Now let's add the script. So we want to have a board class, we want to have a node class, and let's add a node object class and the tower class. Okay, so now let's go inside the board. So we want to create the map reference. So we would have a map. So public node. So it's two-dimensional node array and map. Let's set the size. So int size x, size y, and this should be public. Let's set it public read only. Okay. Actually, not read only. Let's also have public floor. Transform. Actually, sprite renderer floor prefab. Now public sprite renderer a wall prefab and public sprite renderer. Let's say it's going to be the portal prefab. So we go inside the node. The node won't be actually mono behavior, it would be just a normal class, so it would know its position. So public in public read only x and y. public read only int xy, so the position inside the board, and public int type. So this one would have a getter but won't have a setter. So we can always get the value, but we can't set it from outside. And let's say public node over here. We would get, oh, and we also want to have reference to the board, so public read only board, and board, so just set everything int y and int type. Now this board, so read only would make sure we can only set this value inside this constructor, but we can't ever change it. And this would mean that the node we create would always have the same board x and y no matter what. Okay, this should be a node object and not a sprite renderer. Okay, now let's go inside our node. Our public node object terrain and public node object. So terrain would be the floor or a wall, and node object would be portal or towers, mainly towers, maybe something else later. Now let's add the method to update the node. So this would create the tower textures and instantiate stuff. So update node, and when we create the node, we want to already call it. Now let's go inside the board and we want to create the map. So map would be new and node array of size x, size y. And for now we would loop by x and y, so size x. Now loop for the y, size y. And let's say map xy is going to be new node of being board. So this x, y, and 0. So we would say 0 is actually the floor object. So whenever we create a node, we want to create the floor prefab and the tower prefab. So let's do it from the board. So public node object. So we want to create a node object and give it back to the node, and it would do whatever it needs from there. So node object, then create the terrain object, and it would get the type. So if type is equal to -1, so -1 would be a wall in our case, we would return instantiate wall prefab. And everything else for now would be simply a floor, so instantiate floor prefab. So if you want to have something else instead of walls, third type, you just add another if here. Inside the node would say if the terrain object exists and not equal to null, actually equals, yeah, not equal to nulls, we would simply destroy it, destroy terrain game object. So it's not very efficient, but whatever, we won't really update that much. And we would update one node only when we would create new tower. So with that, it should create already an array, a map. So let's try 17 by 11, and the floor prefab would be our tile. Oh, and we need to actually add a node object, and this should do it. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, it's indeed created our map, but as you can see, it's not really at the center. So let's go inside the node object and inside the board, and let's create a center. So public vector to center, and now let's simply say transform.position is going to be equal to new vector 2 size x divided by 2 size y divided by 2 plus the center. So the center would be the offset from the 0, 0 axis, and now it should be exactly aligned in the center. Oh, it should be with minus here. And cool. Okay, so I've created the floor and wall prefabs. So now we have a floor, it looks like this. You can see there is one little problem, like there is kind of lines in here. So to fix this, I'll go inside the textures and change the filter mode to point. And now the lines are gone. Now let's create border. So if the x is 0, or the x is in the x plus 1 equals to size x, or y is equal to 0, or y minus 1, y plus 1 equals to size y, then we are at the borders of the map, and we want to say map xy is equal to new node, and we would just this x, y, and the minus 1. And let's create some portal prefab. So in here, if let's say x going, actually let's say y is equal to size y divided by 2. So exactly at the center, we would say map xy is going to be new node. This x y minus 1, and here minus 2 actually, and here continue, and in here continue, so it would skip this loop whenever it gets to continue and start from the next one. And this is it for now. Now we go inside the scene and add the wall prefab, and let's see what would happen. Cool, so we've got our basic map, and for the last part, let's actually instantiate everything for towers. So if we have type other than -1 and 0, we would want to create its prefab in here. Inside the tower, we want to say tower is a node object, and let's add some stats. So public float attack speed, And let's say it's 1, and public float damage is going to be 1. Again, the node object only has this ID, and that's it. In the board manager, let's create a dictionary. It would contain all the node object we can create based on the int. So we pass ID and we get the node object with that ID. And this would be new dictionary. Now we, for now, would want to have a node object, a tower array. This would have all the towers for now. We might remove it altogether, but for now it should be fine. And first of all, the node object would have our portal. So add portal prefab ID and portal prefab, and would also have all the towers. So for each towers, and node object dot add tower ID, tower, and this one would be node object. Okay. As for the instantiating part, we would say if node objects dot try get value type out var value, and we would return it, else log error type was not found. Okay, so this would make it clear what's the error and return null. Now, this is it basically. So we already have a tower in here. So inside the node, the last part would be to create a method to actually instantiate object. Update object. So if node object not equal to null, here we actually can destroy it. It doesn't matter because we would probably want to replace it altogether. So destroying it would be fine. It actually should be node object. And we would say var, so node object is going to be board dot create object type, and in here if type return. So if the type is 0, there is no object. Anything else, there would be object. So node object is equal to this, and node object the transform dot parent would be our actual terrain object, and node object dot transform dot local position is vector to 0. Now inside of here we call update object, and now let's go inside the towers and put the tower